Hello, everyone. This is Lisa with Inspired Heart Intuitive, here for another evening enlightenment. This is like, I just realized, I think the third wardrobe change I've had today. So this should be kind of interesting. I don't normally change clothes this out. The weather has kind of, it was warm, it was not, and I had to work this morning and whatnot. Anyway, you guys don't care about all that. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching this video. I'll post it live afterwards. I'm going to be doing, here and there until I figure out what nights I want to do evening enlightenment. It'll just be kind of at least once a week. And we're going to continue on this discussion of the empath's journey. And then we might pick up some other discussions along the way. There's a number of things that I really feel led to bring forward to the collective, bring forward to the light workers that have been directed to this channel as we all take this journey together. So first of all, I do want to say that tonight I came from a wonderful channeling session here locally in the Madison, Wisconsin area. And I was there, and I kind of got this download of, what is the truth of this channel? What is the truth, and how does it fit in with the divine purpose that I've been given? And so what sort of dropped in was that the purpose of this channel is to help people live a spirit-led, whole and healed, and fulfilled life. Fulfilled with purpose, right? So I'll massage that a little bit, but that's the general idea is, to be led spiritually, to be led by God, the universe, spirit, however it has been revealed to you, but to help you lead a life led by love, really, by spirit-led life, that is whole and healed, fulfilled with purpose. That's really it. That's been my life's journey. And I believe that's my life's purpose, to help people get to that point. So here we are, part 2 of the empath's journey. If you do tune into any of my dailies, you'll see that I've kind of hinted towards my personal journey a little bit. Sorry, guys. Personal journey a little bit as readings as it kind of comes up. And so I wanted to go a little bit deeper into what that really looks like. Okay. Or I wanted to be a little bit more transparent about my personal journey. And I think I touched a little bit on it in the part 1, but I want to go deeper. So I'm going to really talk about childhood and my childhood in particular. If this resonates with you at all, or if you similar stories or similar experiences, please do feel free to share. I'd love to share them with you. And as we kind of all compare and contrast, I think we will all find in some form or fashion the paths, the journeys, the obstacles are probably very close to because I believe that the training ground for the empathic intuitive that then grows into something more or begins to grow in purpose and begins to grow in their own divinity, we have to go through certain things. I've noticed that there's certain rites of passage, if you will. So I'm going to go back we talked about childhood a little bit. I alluded to what my childhood was like, and I was alluding in that first one, if you might remember, talked about how the empath has to have at least one narcissistic experience. Like every empath needs their narcissist, at least one. And I will venture to say you need that. You need to have that knowingly have that narcissistic experience. You've reached adulthood. I feel like that's like almost critical, because there's certain things you know as an adult, certain capabilities you have as an adult empath that you don't have as a child, or it's not as developed. You don't have it, it's not as developed. So growing up, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, mother and father in the same household. Father had grown up Baptist, was from Chicago. Mom grew up in like Church of God in Christ denomination in Milwaukee. My mother is biracial. So my mom, my maternal grandmother is Caucasian, and my grandfather was African American. Well, Black is what we said then, right? And so this is back in the 50s, because mom is in her mid to late 60s now. You didn't have interracial relationships back then. And I'm going as far, but you'll see why in a little bit. So you didn't have interracial relationships. So I'll talk about mom, and then I'll talk about dad. My biological grandfather on my mom's side, my maternal biological grandfather, I never met him. She has 1, 2, 3 sisters, 2 living, and 1 brother. My maternal grandfather, to say he was abusive was an understatement. Horribly physically abusive, horribly mentally and emotionally abusive. The whole household was run entirely by fear and by physical, mentally, and emotional, just torture, I will say. And there wasn't really an avenue maternal grandmother to turn. Again, she's a white woman married to a Black man, living in a Black neighborhood, going to a Black, and her family disowned her when she married my grandfather. And at that point, physical abuse, it was one of those, especially if you're in the church, but I guess if you were outside the church too, and everything on the church, but it was just something you took. You just took it, right? That was just the way it was. Certainly you must have done something wrong. You just got to do better and he'll be okay. But it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay. And it was never going to be okay. In my mom's teenage years, so I think she was 14, 15 years old. And she's the second oldest of 2, 3, 4, 5. Grandma finally got the courage to divorce Grandpa. And so now Grandma's a single white mother. And she worked for the factories in Milwaukee and, made a living, but she also became a very bad alcoholic. Being a single parent back in this time in the 60s, mid to late 60s, late 60s, was not the thing one did, right? It was just not what one did. It was starting to become something one did. And also back then, at least in Wisconsin, you know, there really, I mean, there was like drinking age, but you could go into the bars with, and routinely my mom would go in, my mom or my aunts would go in and have to get grandma out of the bar. She was drunk. You know, the bartender will call to say, come get your mom. And you bring her home. There's a reason why I'm telling you all this. So now let's talk about dad. My dad. My father, I grew up in Chicago. Parents stayed together. Well, okay. My biological paternal grandmother had one, two, wait, Jenny. Okay, she ended up with 5 children altogether. She had 4 children. My father was the youngest. There were 3 sisters before him. He was originally from Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Grandma was a nurse, a registered, an LPN at the time. And she's for forever. And but my paternal grandfather, biological grandfather, whom I never met, was highly abusive to her. Now, dad was born in the 40s. So, grandma left. And that you definitely never did, right? Grandma left my grandfather and moved up to Chicago with 4 kids. Met the only grandfather I ever knew, Grandpa Thomas. And those 2 were kind of Chicago Baptist church royalty, if you will. There's such a thing. Grandpa was a very prolific musician, a contemporary of Walter Hawkins, if any of you know. Hawkins, and in that genre, in that time period, he and his contemporaries created what we now know today as 3-part gospel music harmony. Created what the genre of gospel music was before it's now kind of hip-hoppy and whatnot. And praise and worship, like it's kind of melded and all this. But that kind of standard choral, that choir, that gospel choir sound was instrumental in that. And my grandmother, not only was she a nurse, she was also a minister in the church. But then you could be evangelist, you couldn't be full minister. So dad grew up underneath the pew. Now when maternal grandmother split, hey, we'll just call her that. When Grandma Kay split from Grandpa, she left the church because the church was of no service to her. She left the church. Grandpa on the other side, they stayed together until the day Grandpa Thomas died. So sorry. He died of cancer. I think it was 12 or 13 at the time. Anyway, Dad was in church almost every day, or if not every, just about every day. There was something going on at the church. Until they got to be a teenager, he was able to do some different things in high school. But every Sunday you were in church. You were in Sunday school. You were in morning service. If there was an afternoon service, you were in afternoon service. Heaven forbid there was an evening service, some choral, something somewhere else, you were there. So Dad was not too keen on religion. Also, though, Grandpa Thomas was the kindest, most gentlest man you would ever know. He was a wonderful man. Never raised his hand in anger. There was, of course, corporal punishment. Never raised his hand in anger. Never raised his hand in none of that. But remember, Dad's biological father was horribly abusive. And they left when he was a baby. He was like 1 when Grandma B left. So fast forward to my mother's 15 years old, going to rescue 15, 16, somewhere in there. Probably 16 at this point. Going to hauled Grandma Kay out of the, and my dad had moved up from Chicago to Milwaukee, and he meets my mom in the bar. So they start dating. She gets pregnant at 16. So they probably met at 15. She's 15. They got married the January before I was born. However, my upbringing was not like Grandpa Tom's. My upbringing, unbeknownst, now I know, but my father had become a narcissist. Very abusive, very controlling, very manipulative. The house by fear. The house was ruled with a strong hand, to say the least. Most to my mother and the oldest of the boys. I am the oldest of 4. I have 3 younger brothers. The abuse really wasn't directed so much physically. There was always this kind of it was still fearful. You were still just afraid. But I quickly learned that to keep peace in the house, there are a few things that would keep peace in the house. Excellence, achievement in anything you did, because Dad loved to brag about us. We were defined by our achievement. We got less than a B in a class. It was hell to tell the captain, as they say. So I, with this, and because my father was so controlling and abusive over my mother, like the apple of his eye, I was his sun and his stars. And he basically placed me in a position higher than my mother. Talk about, right? I don't understand all this till much later in my life. So the house ruled by fear, you develop coping mechanisms. Right now, I believe he got his narcissism from spiritually in a hereditary fashion. Interesting. Because he didn't grow up that way. He wasn't taught that. So that was a spiritual thing that was handed down, right? My mother had become narcissistic supply because Grandpa on that side, on her side, that's how she was taught to be a narcissistic supply from a young age. So here we grade A supply. She didn't understand anything other than love was supposed to hurt. He, for whatever reason, grabbed a hold of this karmatic whatnot, right? It had been handed down to him, and now he's living it out. So I grew up only being, everything was defined for me by my achievement. But by 12, and I would feel the pain, of course, I'm highly sensitive now. I'm highly sensitive to mood swing, energy shifts in the house, all these, because you had to be nimble in order to be able to survive what was going on. At 12, all of a sudden, now I've got this gift of sight. I started having dreams that would come true. I started getting warning dreams, or I would see day visions. And because my mother had taught me charismatic Christianity, because that's what she knew, had taught us that us children, unbeknownst to my father, we never went to a church, I was not fearful of the fact that I was having these dreams and these visions, I just went to mom and said, I'm having these dreams. Oh, you got the gift. Well, unbeknownst to me, of course, it's been handed down through generations from my mom's side. Point being is this: as a child, as an empathic child and an intuitive child, underneath a narcissist, I learned really quickly how, and watching my mother who was a narcissistic, and I didn't know these terms, I didn't get this, but I could pick up on things happening before I even, 10 minutes out, and I would know. Well, he's going to be mad when he comes home. My brothers would be like, well, I just know. We need to do this, 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 and this, and this. As an empathic child, you pick up on all of it. And then as that empathic child, I was always the one, even as a young adult, even as an adult, I was always the one that could calm dad down. I knew how to be just enough of a supply to get what I learned how to manipulate the narcissist, which is scary. I don't know if any other empaths have ever done this. So if you have, well, as children, I mean, if you can really think about it, or even as adults, you can kind of like identify, ooh, yeah, I did that. I'd be very interested in hearing about it. My point is this. I tell you all of that to say this. First of all, narcissists have to be a learned behavior. I do believe it is a spiritually hereditary issue, if you will, but it's a spirit. There's a spirit of narcissism. It is spiritually vampiric. Sucks the life out of other people around it. Developed this narcissism. Yes, it was spiritually handed down to him. However, when you have a mother and a father who are so in the limelight that you can't really get the attention that you feel you need or deserve, or the deserve, you feel unlovable. So therefore you create this persona that you feel is lovable. For him, it was a bad boy persona. But that was the only way he could love. And the only way he could accomplish a lifestyle that he wanted, where he was getting the attention he wanted, was to control the entire household. He had no control over his mother, of course. And she was a very strong woman. She was not going to be controlled either. Remember, she left southern the United States with 4 kids, divorced a man that was abusive to her, whereas my other grandmother stayed. She was highly independent, very forward thinking, very forward all emotion, right? And all of her emotions. So he sought to control it because he couldn't, he never knew his biological father. He was not getting the attention he felt he needed or deserved or wanted because they were so inundated, they were so involved in church all the time. And the only way he could get the attention he desired, that he was longing for, is this little boy that would act up and act out. The only way he could get that attention was by being this bad boy, by being this narcissist, by being this really horrible person, actually. But even negative attention, first love, was better than none. Maybe that's a little bit more about the narcissist than about the empath, right? However, as an empathic child, I would pick up on those energies. The danger of adulthood was this, not just because it was a narcissistic really weird symbiotic codependent relationship. Because in the sense, it was spiritual, energetic incest. I've been placed above my mother. Pecking order. I would get preferential treatment over my mother. And that just set this whole weird dynamic that we'll talk about. But as this empathic daughter, who by the end of my father's life, not only do we recognize, Dad like apologized in his way. To me personally, and then, to my brothers that would listen, I had this very erroneous thought process that I could successfully manipulate the narcissist. After all, my dad eventually came around, and all throughout my childhood, I got whatever I wanted. I could manipulate the narcissist. If Dad was on a rampage, Mom would call me, your father's on a rampage, I need you to calm him down. And I would calm him down. I was the only person that could do it. Every once in a while, I would call him and talk about politics and rile him up and just talk about the other, whatever. I'd have the opposite point of view, not because I really believed in it, but because I just wanted a good sparring partner. And I knew if I let him, then he was just going to be calm the rest of the night. He had to get it off his chest, right? Expend the energy. So I thought I could manipulate the narcissist. And oh boy, I found out much later in life, and very, very recent, that don't work. So, empaths, part 2 of that journey. Look at your childhood or your young adulthood to the earliest narcissist you can remember. And I'm going to assume we all know what a narcissist is. If we don't, we'll talk about it another time. Maybe part 3. Tell me if you want me to. Look back and look at that relationship. Let me know was that your experience, or just sheerly experience the sucking you dry and exhausted all the time from dealing with it. What was your experience? To read energy, to feel energy, to identify with someone's emotion, which is energy in emotion. I could identify with that energy in motion, know what it was, and turn it to what I wanted it to be, bend it to my will by using whatever means I could. It's yours. So this is a dangerous part, right? Do we, as we're children, and we don't really know what we're doing, or as we're adults, just learning how this all works? The danger is that the empath not only is intuitive and feel, digest, identify, whatnot, someone else's emotional state or their energetic state. Not careful, we're very, very manipulative, all in the name of helping. We think we're doing the right thing, but we're not. Because we do not have the right, nor does anyone else, to manipulate someone else's will and someone else's energy. We don't have it. We don't have the right to manipulate someone to the point that they do what we want them to do. Not what we're supposed to be using our gifts for. All right, I gave you some background on me and this snippet, right? So what I take from this is we have the ability to bend people's will, but doesn't mean we should, right? And we'll go into that a little bit more next time. All right, guys, it's like late. I'm exhausted. I only want to talk for 30 minutes. I'm about done right now. So thank you very much for watching this. And we'll do some more of this. It's going to be a part of what this channel is about. I made this evening enlightenment to another channel. But for right now, we're going to leave it all here. Thank you so very much for tuning in, always. Everybody walk in peace, love, much blessing, light. Namaste, my friends. Have a great night or great day if you're watching this in the daytime. Bye-bye.